Right. Good morning, Queensland, and good morning to all of our Facebook live followers. I hope you're having a lovely day. Now, so in some good news, we have 3 new cases, but we're not worried about any of them. So the first one is an overseas acquired case detected in hotel quarantine, and the other 2 cases are locally acquired but detected in home quarantine and linked to known cases. So they were tested on day 12, which is great news to show that everything's working. I know Dr. Young's very pleased with this. So when we ask people when they're a close contact to go in home quarantine, people are doing the right thing and they are being found. So that's keeping Queenslanders safe. So I'm really happy about that. So we've got 14,941 tests over the past 24 hours. And of course, everyone, if you have any symptoms, please go and get tested. That's very important. And then also too, we've had 11,943 vaccines in the past 24 hours. So of course, we are still monitoring the situation in New South Wales very closely. And of course, Dr. Young is giving us updates. We're monitoring very closely that sewage testing. We've just heard breaking news that there's a positive case in Goulburn, so Dr. Young will be talking about that at AHPPC. So we are keeping a very close eye on what's happening in New South Wales. So I just want to reassure Queenslanders that if it gets to the stage that we have to close, we will. But at this stage, we are monitoring it every single day. So I just want to give that assurance to Queenslanders that we are monitoring it every single day. So I'll hand over to Dr. Young. Thanks.
Thank you, Premier. So yes, very good news. Our system is working beautifully because people are being extremely responsive. So we had those 3 cases, one of them in hotel quarantine, tested positive on day 1, had just returned from the UK via Singapore. Then our other 2 cases are cases in the community, both related to the Greek Orthodox Community Centre admin area, and both went into home quarantine when they were identified as close contacts, and they tested negative when they went into quarantine and tested negative again, and then both have tested positive on day 12. Both are well, symptom-free, and so they've already been spoken with, and they've remained in their home, and their other people living in those households have also been in their home. So there is no risk at all with those 2 individuals. But it does prove that it doesn't matter how many negative tests you get, you can, up to that 14 days incubation period, still test positive. So please, anyone who's out there, and I've got some numbers here, so you would remember on the 7th of July there were 5,701 people in home quarantine in Queensland. Today there are 2,924. So people are getting through that 14 days, but there is still a number to go, of course. So it's really important that you do not leave home quarantine until you get that negative test and you're told that you're able to leave, because that's absolutely critical, and I thank everyone who's doing that for that 14 days. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of the Queenslanders who've been home quarantining, and as the Chief Health Officer has just said, we still have 2,924 people quarantining at home, and it's because these people are doing the right thing and staying in their homes over this period that is keeping the rest of Queensland safe. And we continue to get examples of positive cases very late in the 14 days, showing the importance of waiting until that final test on day 12 to see if it's safe or not for people to be released. But it's great to see, almost 3,000 people have left home quarantining just in the last week, and of course these numbers will keep coming down very quickly, but we'll wait for all these test results. Again, the message is clear: social distancing, hand hygiene, staying home if you're unwell, and please getting tested. And thank you to all the businesses, to all the customers who are using the check-in app These are all measures that we didn't have all of these last year, but certainly go a long way to meaning that we can open up on Friday morning and again have the lowest restrictions in the country and have our economy fully operating and supporting businesses and getting people back into work. So thank you all Queenslanders.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner.
So the message is still there for all of those persons in the current area that has the restrictions in place until 6 a.m. Friday to please abide by them. We did hand out 58 masks yesterday, so we still are seeing people not carrying masks and not wearing them when they should. Of course, we will work with people to do that, but our preference is, of course, in order to stop the spread of the virus, that people are wearing the masks. We did have to issue 3 PINs, or penalty infringement notices, and 2 of them were for people who refused to wear masks once being given the option. The other was for a person who had provided false declaration in coming across our border. And at our road borders yesterday, 2,053 vehicles were intercepted and only 1 turned around. That is a very good figure for us, and we continue to monitor that. That means we are getting very good compliance by people coming into this state, and we need that to continue. At our domestic air borders, 1,793 persons intercepted and processed, 8 turned around, 83 into hotel quarantine, and 185 international arrivals, bringing our total hotel quarantine to 2,882, of which 2,224 are international passengers. Thank you.
Any questions?
Premier, if you're reasonably comfortable with the Sydney lockdown, why are you urging Queenslanders, even in regional New South Wales, to come home?
Look, we want Queenslanders to come home because the situation is unfolding each day in New South Wales. So we're seeing more and more cases, we're seeing more hospitalisations, and we are monitoring whether it's spreading to other parts of New South Wales. So if we do see it spreading to other parts of New South Wales, we won't hesitate to shut the border.
So why not follow Victoria's lead and just shut now then?
Because I'm getting the advice of Dr Young, the health advice, and she's monitoring all of that sewage in Greater Sydney. And she is providing us with advice every single day, and we will continue to monitor the situation in New South Wales every single day.
Are you at all of not shutting before Origin at all? Is that an economic?
Not at all. Not at all. Every morning we meet, and every morning we take the advice of Dr Young.
Will Goulburn become a hotspot?
I think so. It was just breaking news on ABC just before I came here.
How concerning is that? How concerning is that?
Sorry?
Do you think the fines are adequate for the 4 people?
I might get the police to address that, but let me make it clear, we do not want people coming here breaking the law, pure and simple. So it is extremely disappointing to see that happen, and I know that Maritime Safety and Police have been working on that, but I think I'll get police to address that if I can.
We're hearing reports of people unable to book in for their second jab in the time frame that's recommended. For example, a few people at Stars who've had their first jab haven't been able to book in.
Yeah, the Health Minister addressed this yesterday. So there was a bit of shortage of supply Monday, Tuesday. I think we're getting more supply today, and we're asking people who are due for their second doses of Pfizer just to ring ahead so we can make sure that you get your second doses. So it's an issue of supply.
Can I just ask you about that case we talked about yesterday, Anthony McCormick? He's the gentleman who flew over from Canada, wanted to
Yes.
an exemption to see his mother, but she passed away. Throughout all this, yourself and Dr Young have maintained Queensland Health were progressing the case and they're waiting on a COVID
That's
test.
my advice, yes, from New South Wales.
Standing by that?
Well, that's my advice.
So
I can only go on what my advice
Mr
is.
McCormick's provided an email he received from Queensland Health, and it says, your request for exemption has not been approved. As no approval has been provided, your request has been closed.
Yeah, but
he received that prior to his mother passing away. How do you reconcile that?
Look, I don't have that email, so I have to have a look at it. Okay?
Premier, he says
Sorry.
he's trying to get that so he can make his mum's funeral, but he'll have to quarantine for 14 days. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. Well, look, we'll talk to him about that. Like I've said, we've actually increased the exemptions unit. We're going to have a medical practitioner there dealing with individual cases. We've got social workers. I think what happened was, before what happened in Greater Sydney, some of that unit had reduced in number, and we're now building it back up to that capacity because there are going to be more of these cases.
Would you be disappointed though if Queensland Health had it in fact?
I haven't read
rejected?
it. I'm not going to comment on something I haven't seen.
It's in black and white. Would you be disappointed?
I
if that was the
haven't
case?
seen it. So
No,
what I
but-
said, I can only go on the advice I have been given.
Yeah, but it would be disappointing, wouldn't it, if Queensland Health have advised you that they're progressing it, but in fact they rejected it?
I haven't seen it. I need to see the
Can
documentation.
I just ask you a question? On a day when you're asking for 2,900 people in home quarantine to do the right thing for 14 days,
Yes.
2 high-profile jockeys were caught on camera partying at toad races up in Port Douglas. They were on day 8 of a 14-day stay-at-home direction. Initially, police said there were no breaches and no action taken. They've updated that yesterday and told us that these jockeys were issued with a warning and asked to either leave the state or isolate. Why aren't stay-at-home orders being enforced and penalised when it comes to high-profile sports stars?
Yeah, well, they are actually, well, no, they're actually ringing and making sure people are, where possible, you know, they should be staying in their, whether it's an apartment or whether it's in their home. But police have investigated that case, so I think police are better to respond to that particular case.
But they were let off with a warning is ultimately what it was when there was video evidence of them breaching.
But I'm not the police. I don't do the investigation. That's a matter for police.
Okay,
Yeah.
could we ask
So,
the
yeah, sure,
Deputy
sure,
Commissioner?
not a problem.
Thank you. So that matter was investigated by Queensland Police. We're aware that those 2 jockeys left their area in Sydney on the 23rd, I think it was, of the month. That was 3 days before the hotspot declaration was made. They came into Queensland. I think they came here to ride, is my recollection from the brief that I've got. That carnival race meet, whatever they call it, was cancelled. They then went to North Queensland. Yep. They then went to North Queensland on a pre-arranged holiday. The Chief Health Officer then made a retrospective order around stay at home. So the circumstances for those is that they should then have gone home and isolated or returned directly back to where they came from in Sydney. Now what they didn't do was they didn't stay at home. That became apparent to us. We did what we do right throughout this pandemic response in Queensland. We work with people and we try to understand what's happening. It was very clear from our investigation that they were not aware of the Chief Health Officer's retrospective order. So therefore they were given exactly the same advice as any person that we've done throughout this. We did not take enforcement action because that has been our clear position, that unless people are willfully disobeying the Chief Health Officer's directions, we do not prosecute them. So given the option, they then went into home isolation as they should have and then chose to return directly to New South Wales. We're not taking any further action. Yes, it was a warning and they complied with that.
Do you think that's acceptable for, I mean, these guys are aware of the COVID rules, they operated in bubbles to keep racing going, all that kind of thing. Is it okay for them to just say, oh, sorry, didn't know about it?
No, I think it's completely fair and completely consistent with what the Queensland Police has done right throughout the pandemic response in Queensland. We have operated under a compassion, communication and compliance approach where we give people the opportunity to comply with the directions. When they do so, that's fine. We let them get on with life. If they willfully or recklessly disobey them, that means that they knew that they were doing it, then we'll take the appropriate action. That wasn't required in this case.
Are you concerned officers are making racist and defamatory comments on social media?
Look, I think the Commissioner has made it very clear in the release she made yesterday in the internal email about how disappointed we are as an organisation. That matter's under investigation, but I'm happy to say here that we expect our police officers to be completely professional and appropriate at all times, and anyone that has done the wrong thing can expect exactly what I say about the community, do the right thing, otherwise there's consequences to it.
2,900 at home quarantine. Do police still do checks on those people?
Yeah, we do random checking as we've always done. I don't have today's figures, but for instance, I think last week we were averaging about 60 checks per day randomly, and we check for compliance, and that's done in collaboration with Shared Services Queensland, who do a lot of the phone calling, and then they advise when there might be a problem with someone not answering the phone. We then further investigate it. A lot of times there's reasonable reasons why they might not have done what they were supposed to, and we work through that. As we did with the jockeys, we give people the chance to comply, and once they do, we don't take any further
Can
action.
you confirm a serving senior police officer is running that racist, homophobic Facebook page?
As I've said, look, that's under investigation at the moment. Like any Facebook page, I'd imagine it has administrators. That will be subject to an investigation who's responsible for it.
What does it say about the culture of the police service?
What it says is that, like any organisation, we have challenges with some of our employees from time to time. We need to address it.
Dr. Young, can I just ask you about this Anthony McCormick case? Because you were quite confident yesterday that Queensland Health were doing everything possible. On what basis are you determining that? Because it seems that the evidence he's provided really flies in the face of that.
I haven't seen that email. I asked the team, were they communicating, were they assessing the risk, were they working with New South Wales? Because ultimately New South Wales needed to release him from hotel quarantine. As you're aware, Australia at the moment has a very strict policy that people will, when they come in from overseas, unless they're coming on green flights from New Zealand, will go into hotel quarantine at their port of arrival for 14 days. So New South Wales needed to release him. So I specifically asked, had he had his on-entry test? In Queensland, we test people, as you've heard today, immediately to see if they're positive or negative when they go into hotel quarantine. So I asked, could I please have that result? I only got that result, unfortunately, from New South Wales after his mother had died.
So if they did in fact close his case, they did so without your knowledge?
Yes, but I don't know. I have to see what that means, close the case, because I know they were still actively working on it.
Can I ask separately, just on his case as well, he's suggesting that his border pass declaration, because he's now seeking to come up here for a funeral, and he's received some advice saying you are required to quarantine upon arrival to Queensland at your own expense. That shouldn't be right, should it, if he's just quarantined in Sydney?
It depends what he's done. So the requirement is if you quarantine in a city that is a hotspot, then you need to travel directly from the quarantine hotel, and that health service needs to release you. You need to travel directly, not in a shuttle bus or public travel. It needs to be in private travel and then travel directly by plane. So it just depends. So
he shouldn't have to quarantine twice, but if he does...
If he does that, no, he does not need to quarantine again.
Why was this new case in Goulburn, could that be a trigger to close the border with New South Wales? And if that isn't the trigger, what would you be looking for?
I need to find out about the case. I'm not aware of it, so I'll be speaking to my colleague at 12:30 today, and it just depends about the case. A bit like Victoria has announced another case, and that hasn't been enough to declare a hotspot down there. So they had someone travel from Sydney, return, and then another household member has tested positive. So every case is an individual case, and I just need to go through all the risks and what it means.
Just to clarify, is the exemptions unit reduced?
Yes, because we weren't seeing the same requests because there were no hotspots in Australia.
With people testing positive on day 12, are you confident then that you're catching all of them?
Yes.
On day 12, does it need to be a later testing?
No. Day 12, I'm very confident. Then we also do a day 16 test, and we ask people in the days that they leave quarantine to be careful what they do in those 2 days. That was a decision made at AHPPC, just for extra confidence to do day 16. Because if we did a day 14, they wouldn't get their results back for another day or two, and that would mean their quarantine period would be extended. So we test day 12, get a negative result, and then they can leave quarantine day 14, and then we do another test day 16.
This might be a question for the Deputy Commissioner. If I receive a yacht case, you might be aware. What was the red flag that got authorities onto that?
I think that'll be...
Can I say to you, I don't know, because that was a Maritime Safety Queensland investigation. So basically they've done a fantastic job. They've identified this, they've investigated, they've taken the enforcement action. So police got involved in terms of the hotel quarantine aspect.
We've also got a story tonight as well of the Victorian couple, the Queensland couple from Victoria who jumped the border quite a few weeks or months ago. I mean, the general message to people trying to dodge you at the border, obviously you had to give out a fine recently that you mentioned in your statement there. So what's your message to that?
So $4,135 for doing false declarations or being untruthful when you come across the border. Border breaches carry that very heavy penalty. Look, people are just doing the wrong thing. Overall, you look at the figures, as I said, over 2,000 vehicles and one person has to be turned around. Most of our community by and large, are absolutely doing the right thing, and they have all the way through this. It's a small minority, including some people who think they can just do whatever they want and then come in on a big boat and do what they did. There's consequences for that, and the reason there's consequences for it is because we're trying to keep the virus out of Queensland. So they should stop that.
With those 3 yachts that have come up in the past week, how come we didn't find out about them yesterday?
So we've spoken about that today. We're making sure that both through our district disaster coordinators and through Water Police, as well as Maritime Safety Queensland, that they have sufficient resources to do the sort of patrols we're looking for. They're doing a great job, but obviously we saw this last year. There was a little bit of a period there where we saw more boats than we would have liked to, and we'll increase our patrols to make sure that we can cover that.
Premier, just ask one last question, Premier. Just the public seem to be getting pretty sick of concessions being made to celebrities and sports stars. Why should
I don't think that's correct at all. So can I just reject the premise of your question there?
I think if you listen to Talkback Radio, you'll hear a lot of people exasperated about it.
Well,
why should they trust your government to handle 400 footballers coming in here from Sydney?
because we're working with the NRL. We worked with the AFL. I mean, well, what's going to happen? No competition. I don't think the public would like that. So they've got to abide by the rules, and there'll be strict penalties if they fail.
People are getting sick of the unfairness. You're hearing these cases about Anthony McCormack and people not being able to see dying relatives.
That's why you haven't been to these previous press conferences. We've been speaking about making sure that exemptions unit is increased, right? We just had a meeting about that today as well, okay? I mean, this is tough. We are in a pandemic and we are trying to do the best by everyone, okay? So there's no special rules for people. We are trying to treat people in the best way we possibly can. And have a look at Queensland. So far, Queensland's going okay, all right? But anything can change any day. And if you don't think that's stressful, come and take a walk in my shoes.
Premier, do you think Anthony Albanese keeping a coal mine visit secret is going to help Labor in the federal election?
Look, I don't see why he doesn't talk about going to coal mines. You know, I go to renewable wind farms. I go to looking at where we're going to do hydrogen. I think people should be upfront.
Do you think he should be talking about it more and publicising?
Well, that's a matter for him. I'm not him. Okay? Thanks everyone. Have a nice day.